All right, guys, don't forget to do that. Please give me some time. Okay. So today we're going to continue. We're going to finish working on the listening section. Yesterday we went over the theory behind the TOEFL lectures, right? Which is the second part of the listening. In the listening section, we said that there were going to be two different types of audios that you have to hear. The first one is going to be conversations. We already did that on Tuesday. We practiced on Wednesday. And yesterday we saw lectures, which was the second type. And today, since it's our practice session, we're going to be practicing the lectures. We'll do as many as we can. And remember that the important thing is always to focus to balance your understanding and your note-taking strategies. You should be aiming to take notes only about the details, right? You hear the concepts, you hear the definitions, you pay attention to them, and you don't take notes. You're only going to take notes of the key details, of the things that are hard to remember. So if you had specific names, specific terms, specific terminology, specific numbers, specific examples, that's what your notes should be, right? Not the big ideas, because you should be paying attention for them. So do you guys have any questions before we start listening to this lecture? So our first lecture for today. Okay, guys, then please get ready to take notes. I'm going to play our first lecture.
Listen to part of a lecture from a life sciences class. Raise your hand if you're right-handed. Yep, that looks typical. Most of us, about 90%, are right-handed. It's been that way throughout history. In nearly every culture, right has been associated with positive qualities, while the left has been associated with negative, or even evil ones. In Latin, left means sinister. In ancient Japan, men could reject or refuse to marry women who were left-handed. In modern China, teachers try to force left-handed students to learn to write with their right hands. And, as I'm sure all lefties know, everyday items like can openers, scissors, computer keyboards are designed for righties. In short, left-handers have been made to feel left out. Get it? It might seem straightforward to you and I, but scientifically speaking, the basis of handedness is not well understood. Most scientists define right-handed or left-handed on the basis of a person's preferred writing hand. But some scientists claim it should be based on the hand that is faster and more accurate in performing manual activities like tightening a screw or tying a knot. Still others claim that ability doesn't matter. In other words, that handedness should denote only preference. Yes, question.
What about people who are who use both hands?
You mean ambidextrous. Actually, most scientists agree that genuine ambidexterity is rare, and several of them believe it even rates its own special category as a distinct type of handedness. The reason for this is that most people can perform several functions relatively equal with either hand, which causes another scientific fraction to argue that there are actually only two types of handedness, right and non-right. This group advocates measuring handedness on a continuum from 100% right-handed to 100% left-handed. On this scale, we'd say something like, I'm 60% right-handed, or I'm 82.5% right-handed. Though how we'd determine who's more right-handed than another would open up a whole new can of worms. Okay, yes.
How do people become right-handed or left-handed in the first place? Does it come from your genes?
Mostly, yes. Research shows that handedness is largely genetic. Interestingly, though, even when both parents are left handed, the odds are no better than 50-50 that their children will be lefties. Some scientists believe there is a specific gene that determines right handedness, but the trouble is that they can't pinpoint it. They think this gene also aids in development of speech and language comprehension. Many researchers believe that handedness is a result of something called brain lateralization, which is the concept that each hemisphere of the brain controls different bodily functions. Researchers have long been believed that a person's dominant hand is on the opposite side of the brain hemisphere that controls their language specialization, so that right-handed people use the left half of their brain for processing language. But brain lateralization is not well documented, and there is evidence that seems to contradict this concept. For instance, while it's true that more than 90% of right-handed people do process language in their left hemisphere, recent research shows that about 40% of left-handed people also process language primarily in the left side of their brain. Additionally, only 10% of lefties rely primarily on their right brain to process language. So, what can we make of this? Though genetics clearly play a vital role in determining handedness, environment also seems to be an important factor. A recent archaeological study compared a group of modern Canadians with thousand-year-old skeletons from a British farming community. The Canadians showed right-handed dominance by a 9-to-1 ratio of larger right elbows than left ones. In the ancient skeletons, however, most right and left elbows were equal. Now, this doesn't prove that the British farmers were ambidextrous, but researchers say it does suggest that handedness can be subject to societal influence. So for many, the best hypothesis at this time is that handedness results from a complex interaction of nature and nurture.
Okay, guys. So that was our lecture. Could you guys tell me what it was about?
The lecture was about the handedness.
Exactly, about it was about handedness. What specifically do they say about handedness? I mean, what information does the professor cover about handedness?
He talked about a theory that right-handedness people are more positive than left-handed. The left-handed also are evil in this theory, and then he talked about the genetics from how people can be right-handed and or left-handed.
Okay, yes, exactly. Thank you, Adrian. That's true. So he talked about first how left and right-handed people are seen, as you said. So right-handed people are seen in a more positive way. Then he also talked about what determines handedness, both from a scientific way, from our genes and the genetic part, and also speaking of our environment, right? So he talked about the different things. Now, the first question says, what is the main topic of the lecture? What would you guys say?
Probably It's the scientific basis of handedness.
Okay, do you guys agree? Does everyone agree? Yeah, I do agree. Because everything A, B, and C, I would say that all of those were mentioned, right? The professor that did define handedness. The professor did talk about right-handed dominance, so how right-handed people or like left-handed people have been sort of excluded from society in different cultures throughout time. And he definitely also talked about handedness genetics. But yes, if we have to choose one option that encompasses everything, I would say it has to be the scientific basis of handedness, right? Because they talk about all of those things. Well done. Now, our second question here says, why does the professor mention Japan and China?
It is option A in reference to an archaeological study.
Okay, are you sure? If you guys have Japan or China in your notes, then take a look at that. Try to see where it was mentioned, what the professor was saying when he brought up Japan and China.
They say, or he said that in Japan, for example, the people forced to left-handed to be right-handed. So I think that is but also when he talked about the environment, he said that in Asian are like ambidextrous. So probably it could be less see as examples of handedness prejudice. I don't know how to spell that word.
Yes, prejudices. Yes, I think I do agree. What you're saying is great. So yes, when the professor mentioned Japan and China, what he was saying is, as you said, that how students have been forced to write with their, or left-handed students have been forced to learn to write with their right hand. He also explains how I don't know where this was, but I think it was Japan, where men could reject to marry women who were left-handed, how everyday things, everyday items like scissors and can openers, they're all designed for right-handed people. So the professor was talking about handedness prejudices, right? How the word left is associated to evil. So yes, those are handedness prejudices. Also, if only you guys remember the structure of the lecture, you should remember that Japan and China were mentioned in the beginning when the professor was talking about these prejudices, right? The archaeological study came later, almost at the end of the lecture, when the professor was talking about how the environment determines, or how the environment plays a role in determining handedness. That was later. But in the beginning, they were mentioning things related to prejudices. Okay, guys, our next question says, according to the professor, what is the problem with the concept of brain lateralization? What do you guys think?
It does not seem to apply to determining handedness because he said that in a recent studies, people right-handedness is not always use the opposite side of the brain. So maybe it's D.
Okay, great, Noelia. And I love the fact that you always have evidence referring to the big ideas, because that's the goal here, to understand those ideas. So yes, the concept of brain lateralization is basically that the hemisphere that we use for, or that whether we are left-handed or right-handed is somehow like determined by the hemisphere that we use for processing language, right? And the theory was that left-handers process language in their, I don't know if it was their left side of the brain or the right side of the brain, to be honest, I don't know. I think it was the opposite, as you said, so probably the right side. But the problem is that there were some studies, some evidence that showed that right-handers also process their language in the same hemisphere, right? Like about 40, 50%. So that's the problem, that it doesn't seem to apply to determining handedness. Is not well documented, the professor says. It's not disproven by the archaeological study. This comes later when they talk about the environment. And these two are related to the concept of brain lateralization, not to the problem with brain lateralization. Right, exactly. Now, question 4 says, why does the professor say this? I'm going to replay this part, and you guys will tell me what the professor means when he says that.
Line for righties. In short, left-handers have been made to feel left out. Get it? Left-handers have been made to feel left out. Get it?
So why does the professor say, get it? What would you guys say? No answers. Nobody has an opinion on this one. If you don't know, guess, take an educated guess.
I'm between B or D, but actually I'm not pretty sure.
Okay. B or D. Do you know what a pun is?
No, but I understand like it was like this, like to paying attention.
No. A pun is basically playing with words. Like a
like a paraphrase.
No. Paraphrase means to say the same in different words, right? To use synonyms. So a pun is like a game of words, like something like, that words sometimes have like different meanings. So playing, like, for example, a tongue twister could be a pun in a way because it plays with the words. So using the different meanings of the word. Now, in this case, the professor said, in short, left-handed people have been or are left out, right? That's what he said. And then he laughs and he says, get it?
Okay. So it's B.
Yes, because he's saying, well, he made a joke. he is using the two meanings of the word left. Left-handed people have been left out, so have been excluded, left. And he's like, he made that joke and he wants to see if the students got it. So he's directing the students' attention to that one. Right? Yes. Now, if the students are paying attention, it would be something different. Like, do you follow me? You there or something like that. Now, in question 5, we have, in the lecture, the professor mentions problems, again, that scientists have in determining handedness. Indicate which of the following statements is true. A statement related to a problem that scientists have in determining handedness. What do you guys think?
D, about 90% of left-handers process language in the left side of their left brains.
Their left brains, you sure? Would that be a problem though? I think if that were true, then it wouldn't be a problem, right? I think the problem was that also 40% of right-handed people process language in their left side as well, right? That there's a contradiction there because both left-handers and right-handers process language in the same hemisphere. So what would you say? You know, option B would also not be a problem because if most scientists agreed on defining handedness, then that wouldn't be a problem. But to be honest, I would say that maybe options C and A make more sense to me. And I would go for option A. Because the problem is that scientists don't agree on how to define handedness, how to determine handedness, right? Because some scientists say that handedness is basically your hand of preference. Other scientists say that it's the hand that is faster, that is more accurate. Other scientists say that there's actually only right-handed people, and it's, I think, like a spectrum. So 90% right-handed, 90%, so I don't know, 70% left-handed. Some people say that, and people that are ambidextrous belong to another category. So it's that scientists don't agree, right? That some scientists claim that the only handedness is right and non-right is one of the problems that scientists don't agree. So is that okay, guys? Okay. So that would be it. Our answers are probably going to be correct. The topic of the lecture is the scientific basis of handedness, because as we said, right, even though options A, B, and C are in the lecture, they're not the main topic. The main topic is just handedness and its scientific basis, because they talk about all of those things. Japan and China were mentioned in the beginning, as we said, when they were talking about handedness prejudices, how left-handed people have been excluded, have been forced to learn to write with their right hand, have been, I don't know, bullied in a way because they have been, like women have been rejected. Now, the problem with the concept of brain lateralization is that it doesn't seem to apply to determine handedness, right? It's not well documented, there's not enough evidence, and there's actually research that contradicts the theory. The professor says get it because he wants to see if students got the joke or the pun that he made. And the problem is that some scientists claim the only handedness is right and not right. So is that okay, you guys? Do you have any questions so far about this one that we just did? No questions? Okay, guys, then let's do one more. I'm going to play the lecture. Please pay attention. Okay.
Listen to part of a university lecture on animal behavior by a professor of biology. We're looking at animal behavior this week, and let's turn now, class, to one of its most dramatic manifestations, animal mimicry. Organisms that are good to eat or that are attacked for other reasons often develop devices, through evolution of course, techniques and devices to protect themselves from their attackers in order to survive and in order to reproduce and pass their genes on to the next generation. And one of these techniques, one of these strategies, is to look like something else, to look like something that is not good to eat, or something that is otherwise of no interest to the predator. An organism that does this, that resembles something else, is called a mimic. And the thing that it has evolved to resemble is called the model, while the predator that it is trying to mislead is called the recipient, the one that receives the misleading image. Some mimics do this by adopting camouflage, which is a cryptic resemblance to something of no interest to its enemy. And by doing this, they become invisible. They are hidden. Many animals, insects, lizards, amphibians, mimic the abundant plant life in the habitat around them. I'm sure that you've seen green grasshoppers and brown moths that seem to be well hidden on grass stems and tree trunks when they're motionless. But the leaf-tailed gecko, a small lizard in Madagascar, is a master at this. It avoids its enemies by looking exactly like a cluster of old dead leaves. And there are various species of katydids, grasshopper-like insects that have managed to duplicate the appearance of leaves with startling accuracy. In all stages of growth, some species looking like fresh green leaves and others looking like old decaying leaves, complete with leaf veins, weathered edges, and mildew spots. These adaptations make these animals difficult or impossible for a predator to identify or even notice, and so these otherwise defenseless creatures are overlooked or passed by. Other organisms defend themselves directly with stings or bites, or with poisons or other noxious chemicals, and such organisms often assume bold, characteristic colors and markings, called warning coloration, that warns a predator, reminds it that this creature can inflict pain or discomfort, or that it tastes very bad. The bold orange and black pattern of the common monarch butterfly, or the black and yellow bands on a bumblebee are such warning colorations. And sometimes this warning coloration is so effective that another species, a species that doesn't have any of the protective devices of sting or poison or whatever, will adopt the same warning colors and pattern. This sort of mimicry is called Batesian mimicry. The name comes from the early zoologist H.W. Bates, who back in 1862 first suggested an explanation for the origins of mimicry based on Charles Darwin's new theory of natural selection. This was one of the earliest applications of Darwin's ideas to an unknown biological phenomenon. Now, viceroy butterflies taste good to many birds, but because they mimic the monarch butterfly's model's color pattern, because viceroy butterflies look like monarch butterflies, they are avoided, just like the monarch is. In the same way, many harmless fly species resemble the bumblebee model, and also in this way they avoid being eaten by the recipients, birds. So these are bastion mimics. There are several conditions that must be fulfilled, though, for a bastion mimic to be successful. The mimic must, of course, share the same general region and habitat as its model, but the mimic must also be less numerous than its model, which must be relatively abundant. That way, the odds are that the recipient predator will sample an unpalatable model first, which is very important for keeping the trick effective. A similar kind of mimicry is Mullerian mimicry, named after another early biologist. And in this sort of mimicry, both the model and the mimic are dangerous or taste bad. A very obvious example is the way that so many unrelated species of bees, wasps, and ants have assumed similar, bold, black and yellow, or black and orange banded patterns. By doing this, Mullerian mimics present a united image that predators soon learn to be weary of. There's also another aspect of mimicry that I'd like to mention too, and that's the mimicry used by predators. This is called aggressive mimicry, and it is used to conceal or misrepresent a predator until its prey comes near enough to capture. Many mantids, for example, are green or brown, so that they blend in with their plant surroundings. But some tropical mantids are fantastically shaped and colored, like the beautiful orchid mantis, which resembles a petal of one of those tropical flowers, and it hides motionless next to one of these orchids until an insect comes within its reach. There are also several green-colored vine and grass snakes of various families, which lie invisible among the tangled vines and branches of the jungle until they suddenly lash out to grab their prey. Actually, there are an endless number of ingenious mimics in the natural world, and I recommend that you all try a Google Images search tonight for some more interesting examples of this fascinating behavior.
Yes. So let's now take a look at the questions. All right, first question says, why does the lecture, well, first of all, before looking at the questions, this was a classification, a lecture that was organized in a classificational style, right? Because we have different types of sound. First of all, what was the topic of the lecture?
Animal behavior.
Yes, but it was one specific thing related to animal behavior, right? One specific behavior.
The evolution and the protect to survive.
Yes and no. So it is a behavior that animals use in order to survive, totally. But there's a name. It's animal mimicry, right? That's the topic. And can anybody please define mimicry? What is mimicry according to the professor? No one really? Okay, just for this once, let's play this, the beginning of the lecture, because that's important. Remember what we said, right? During the introduction, don't take any notes. You just have the topic there, animal mimicry, and you have an explanation of what it is. It is really important that you guys understand what the topic is, because if you don't, then you're going to be lost throughout the entire lecture, right? You're going to be like, so what is this even about? So it's important that you pay attention, special attention to the introduction and understand very well the topic. So, all right, animal mimicry. Let's hear it again.
Listen to part of a university lecture on animal behavior by a professor of biology. We're looking at animal behavior this week, and let's turn now, class, to one of its most dramatic manifestations, animal mimicry. Organisms that are good to eat or that are attacked for other reasons often develop devices, through evolution of course, techniques and devices to protect themselves from their attackers in order to survive and in order to reproduce and pass their genes on to the next generation. And one of these techniques, one of these strategies, is to look like something else, to look like something that is not good to eat, or something that is otherwise of no interest to the predator. An organism that does this, that resembles something else, is called a mimic. And the thing that it has evolved to resemble is called the model, while the predator that it is trying to mislead is called the recipient, the one that receives the misleading image. Some mimics do this by adopting.
Right, so all of that was the introduction. To be honest, the only things that I would have taken notes of would be the specific terms they mentioned at the end, right? Like this organism is called, I would write that down. But everything else is just paying attention. Don't take any notes, right? Because that was an entire introduction of the topic. So what is mimicry then? Mimicry is when an animal or an organism, in order to survive, to pass on their genes, and to just survive, hides, right? Looks like something else in order to fool, in order to mislead another animal. So one animal is trying to imitate something else. It could be another animal, it could be part of its environment in order to mislead another animal. That is mimicry, right? And we have 4 different types of mimicry. Do you guys remember what the types were? First type was camouflage. It's important, guys, that when you have classification, you are able to catch the different types. We have camouflage, we have Bayesian mimicry. Anybody else remembers any other? Camouflage, Bayesian, we have Mullerian, and finally we had aggressive mimicry. So it's important that you understand this is going to be classification, and then you're able to catch the 4 different types. And each type is going to have obviously an explanation because you don't know what Bayesian with what camouflage is. So you will have an explanation. Camouflage is this and this and that. You have to pay attention there, don't take any notes. And then you will have examples of each type. An explanation, examples. An explanation, examples. Right? That's what you will always have when you have classification. So this part, you're not supposed to take any notes. You're just going to listen and pay attention. And the examples are the ones that you're going to write down because these are going to be the details, specific names, specific numbers, specific dates. And obviously the names, right, that you have to be aware of. Okay, guys, so I hope that you understood at least most of the ideas because we're going to now answer the questions. First question says, why does the professor or why does the lecturer mention Charles Darwin? Any ideas?
I think at the beginning of the lecture, the professor says something about the resemble is a synonym of the mimicry for me.
Okay.
C, la option C.
Yes, I don't know though. Darwin explained mimicry for the first time. You sure? I don't know. It was mentioned in the beginning, that's correct. But I don't know if Darwin was the one who explained it directly. I think Darwin's theory was used to explain mimicry, right? If we look at the transcript, so they say, okay, the name comes from the early zoologist H.W. Bates, who back in 1862 first suggested an explanation for the origins of mimicry. So the person who first suggested an explanation for mimicry was Bates, based on Charles Darwin's new theory of natural selection. This was one of the earliest applications of Darwin's ideas to an unknown biological phenomenon. So I would honestly have this in my notes. Bates, 1862, Darwin application, right? So in this case, Darwin's theory was used to explain mimicry. He didn't directly explain it, but his theory of natural selection was applied in the concept of mimicry. You guys? Is that okay? All right. Noelia, were you gonna say something?
Just okay.
Okay, great. Our next question here says, what is the term used for an organism that is fooled by mimicry? Retail question.
I'm not sure, but I think that she talked about the device.
I mean, I think mimicry is the device that animals use to pass on their genes to survive. It's like a technique, right? A device that they use to survive. But mimicry is the device. They're asking for the term used for the organism that is fooled by mimicry. We have three different terms, right? Recipient was one of them.
The option is A, because the professor mentioned that the animals use the mimicry to disappear in front of the predators, and
Yeah.
well, the predators are the recipient.
Yes, exactly. You agree. So yes, because we have the mimic is the animal that hides. The mimic is the animal that looks like something else, that imitates something. The model is the thing or the animal that the first animal is trying to imitate, right? It makes sense, the model. So the mimic imitates the model in order to fool, in order to deceive the recipient, right? Who's the one that receives the action, receives the mimicry, like the object. If even for like viewing it from a grammar perspective, we have the doer, the action, the mimicry, the model, and the receiver of the action, right? Which is the recipient, the one that is fooled by mimicry. The one that fools versus the one that is fooled, you know, object. So yes, the recipient. One very important detail that was mentioned in the beginning, and this is actually what I was telling you, I would totally try to take notes on these terms. When you have specific names, specific terms, take notes of them. Now, question 3 says, why does the lecturer mention katydids? What do you think? This is probably gonna be, I mean, if you don't know, then you should assume that this is gonna be an example of the first type of mimic, right? Which was camouflage. If you guys remember a little bit of what camouflage was, then you should know that camouflage was basically when the animal hides or tries to, or looks like something from its environment, right? So an animal looks like something that's part of its environment, resembles part of its environment, so that it blends in, you know, it hides in the environment. So in that case, which option would it be?
D, because they look like leaves.
They look like leaves. It's an example of camouflage, actually, and katydids are like grasshoppers, like saltamontes, so they do look like leaves. Now, tasting bad and stinging are concepts related to other type of mimicry. I think that's related to Mullerian and Baitian mimicry, not to the first type, to camouflage. And this was an example of camouflage. And bumblebees, resembling bumblebees, was the one where they present a united front. So it's not option B either. It's an example. You know, remember what I told you last class? Obviously, this is not always going to be 100% true, but if you guys have to guess, if you don't know the answer, then assume that the questions, that you only get one question per idea, and that they're going to go in the same order. So you're probably going to get this first question that is about the examples is probably going to be about the first type. The next question is more likely going to be about the second or the third type. And then the final question could very likely be about the last type. We don't know, obviously, but you have to assume something and you have to guess if you don't know, right? So those are some tips if you're guessing. Our next question here says, some moths and butterflies have large owl-like eye spots concealed on their underwings, which they can suddenly display to a predator. Which kind of mimicry is this an example of?
Probably, or well, I think that it's Baitian mimicry.
Baitian mimicry, okay. Okay, do you guys agree? Yes. Okay, so yes, I mean, I suppose it's Bayesian mimicry. It's not camouflage because camouflage is just looking like something from the environment, right? And it's not aggressive, definitely not, because aggressive mimicry is the technique or the mimicry that predators use to catch their food, right? To catch prey, to catch other animals. So it's not camouflage, it's not aggressive. I would say it has to be between C and A, sorry. But, you know, from what we said, it would make more sense if it's A, Bayesian mimicry, the second. Now, question 5.6, which organism is presented as an example of Mullerian mimicry? What do you think? Mullerian?
Orchid mantis.
Okay. Yeah, I do think so. The leaf-tailed gecko is for camouflage, and butterflies, I think, is for the previous one, right? For Bayesian. So yes, makes sense. Now, which would be the best title for this lecture? This is the one that's supposed to go in the first, the main idea type. We have animal behavior, creativity, deception, or escapades. What do you all think? Think about the fact that this is about animal mimicry, right? It is true that it's about animal behavior, but it's about one specific like behavior, one specific concept of animal behavior, right? Animal mimicry. You already know what mimicry is, so based on what you know, what would you say the best title for this lecture could be?
It could be animal escapades.
Yes, I mean, it does make sense because most animals use mimicry to escape from their predators, but not all, right? Because we have aggressive mimicry as well, where the predators use it to actually catch and attract their prey. So I don't know. Do you guys know what deception means?
No, I'm not.
So deception basically means like engaños. So I would say it's animal deception, right? Because mimicry at the end of the day consists in decepting an animal by looking like something else. So you look, or the animal looks like something else, like an environment, like another animal, in order to fool, in order to decept, in order to mislead, engañar the other animal, right? Either the prey or the predator, but at the end of the day, it's about fooling another animal. So I would say animal deception would be the best. Hey guys, vocabulary. Vocabulary is important. So, is this okay? Do you guys have any questions about this one? If you see this lecture meets all of the traditional structure, right? Where you have one question per subtopic, where the questions go in order. But of course, this is not going to be always 100% like this. So it's just a technique if you have to guess. But ideally, my suggestion is just practice. To be completely honest with you guys, the only way you're going to get better is by practicing, assuming that you're already in a good level, right? That you have good grammar, very good vocabulary, then it's just practicing. But if you need to still work with your grammar, your vocabulary, then you need to also work on that first. You need some basis. But aside from that, is practicing, same thing as the reading, to be honest. Reading and listening is just practice. Speaking and writing, there are some strategies, some things we can do. But with the listening, mostly practice. Okay, guys? So do you have any questions, any comments? All clear? Okay, guys, if everything's okay, then we're gonna stop here and we'll actually move on to a different section next class. We'll be doing the speaking section. So please, before you go, don't forget today's daily survey. And we will be seeing each other again next Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Jimena.
Bye.
Bye.